They found her ship burned to ash, but inside, the cubs slept warm beneath her folded cot. The alarm screamed through the bridge of the eternal tide, cutting through the quiet hum of deep space travel. Captain Taman looked up from his reports, his 4 eyes narrowing at the display. A distress beacon. Out here in the void margin where nobody with sense ever traveled? Captain, we're picking up a human signature, said the navigation officer, her scales shifting nervously. It's weak. Very weak. Taman stood, his tall frame casting shadows across the console lights. He was Thurkely, a species known for caution and careful planning. The void margin was neither cautious nor planned. It was chaos. Pirates, debris fields, and dead ships floating in the dark. How long has it been transmitting? He asked. At least 4 standard cycles, sir. Maybe more. 4 cycles. Nobody survived 4 cycles in a dead ship. Taman knew this. Everyone on the bridge knew this. But the beacon was still calling, still hoping, still believing someone would come. Set a course, Taman said quietly. Prepare the boarding team. His second officer, a grizzled warrior named Vec, clicked his mandibles in disapproval. Captain, the void margin is not safe. This could be a trap. Pirates use distress beacons to lure ships. Noted, Taman replied. But we go anyway. The eternal tide moved through the darkness like a silver needle threading black cloth. It took 3 hours to reach the source of the beacon. When they arrived, the crew fell silent. The ship was small, a human cargo hauler. It drifted without power, without lights, without life. The hull was scorched black, twisted metal blooming from its sides like deadly flowers. Scorch marks told the story of weapons fire, of a fight, of desperation. The name on the side was barely readable, Morning Grace. Life signs? Taman asked, though he already knew the answer. None, Captain. The ship is dead. Reactor offline. Life support offline. Temperature inside is near absolute zero. Taman stared at the wreckage. Something felt wrong. Not dangerous wrong. Sad wrong. Prepare the boarding team anyway, he ordered. Engineer Hanul, you're leading this one. Hanul was human, one of only 3 in the crew. She was small compared to most species, with dark hair tied back and grease permanently under her fingernails. She looked at the Morning Grace with an expression Taman had learned to recognize in humans. Grief for someone she'd never met. Yes, sir, she said softly, the boarding pod attached to the Morning Grace with a metallic clang that echoed through the dead corridors. Hanul and her team entered carefully, magnetic boots holding them to the floor in the zero gravity. Their helmet lights cut through the frozen darkness. Ship's been dead for days, Hanul reported over the comm. Everything's fried. Looks like weapons damage to the reactor. Whoever piloted this was running from something. They moved through the corridors, ice crystals glittering in their lights like tiny stars. The bridge was empty. The living quarters were empty. The escape pod was still docked, unused. That's strange, muttered one of the team members. Why didn't they take the pod? Hanul didn't answer. She was looking at the cargo hold door. It was sealed, but power had been rerouted to it somehow. Emergency systems, backup batteries, everything had been channeled to keep that one door locked and secure. Help me get this open, she said. It took 20 minutes of cutting and prying. When the door finally opened, Hanul's breath caught in her throat. The cargo hold was dark, but not frozen. Not completely. Emergency heating coils lined the walls, jury-rigged together with wire and determination. In the center of the room, 6 small shapes huddled together on a thermal blanket. Cubs, feline, with silver-gray fur and impossibly large eyes. They were sleeping, curled against each other. Their tiny bodies rising and falling with breath. They were alive. Oh my God, Hanul whispered, and then she saw the woman. She was lying beside the cubs. Her body frozen in death, ice crystals covering her face like tears. She wore a simple flight suit with a name patch. Guwu Park, her coat, thick and insulated, was wrapped carefully around the cubs. Her hands were still clutching a power cell, frozen in place. Her fingers red and raw where she'd worked without gloves to save every second of heat. The cubs were Velkari. Hanul recognized them from the database. They were an endangered species, sacred to dozens of cultures across the galaxy. These 6 might be among the last of their kind, and this human, had died to keep them warm. "Captain," Hanul said, her voice breaking, "you need to see this." The next hours were a blur. The cubs were brought aboard the Eternal Tide, carefully, gently, wrapped in thermal blankets. They were weak, malnourished, but alive. Impossibly, incredibly alive. Ji Woo Park's body was brought aboard too. Treated with the respect given to fallen heroes, the crew gathered in the medical bay, staring at the sleeping cubs through the glass. Nobody spoke. Nobody knew what to say. Kyung-Soo, the medical officer, stood beside Captain Taemin. He was human too, older, with gray in his hair and sadness in his eyes. "I examined her body," Kyung-Soo said quietly, "and the ship's systems. Do you want to know what she did?" Taemin nodded. The reactor was failing. She had maybe 3 days before it died completely. The escape pod had enough oxygen and supplies for 1 person to survive for weeks. She could have called for help and waited in safety. "But she didn't," Taemin said. "No, she stayed in the cargo hold. She rerouted every bit of power to those heating coils. Life support, emergency systems, even the escape pod's batteries, everything. She worked for 3 days straight by my estimate, keeping those cubs warm. When the power finally ran out, she gave them her coat. Her body heat, everything. Did she know help wasn't coming?" asked Taemin. "Her log suggests she did. The void margin is monitored by no one. She must have known she was going to die." One of the Valkyrie cubs stirred, making a small sound like a question. Hanul reached out instinctively, her hand against the glass, wishing she could touch it, comfort it, tell it that it was safe now. "Why?" Vec asked, his warrior's mind unable to understand. "Why didn't she save herself?" "They're animals." "Valuable, yes, but animals." Hanul turned to him, tears on her face. "They're babies," she said simply. She couldn't leave babies to freeze in the dark. Taemin looked at Jiwoo's body, covered respectfully on a nearby table. She looked peaceful, like she'd made her choice and had no regrets. "Scan the ship completely," he ordered. "I want to know everything. Who she was, where she was going, and who did this to her." The crew moved to obey, but Taemin stayed behind. Watching the cubs sleep beneath the ghost of a coat they could no longer see in the silence of space. The morning grace drifted still, a burned monument to an impossible choice. They found her ship burned to ash, but inside, the cubs slept warm beneath her folded coat. Dayun sat in the computer lab surrounded by fragments of broken data. The scientist's multiple arms worked across several screens at once, trying to piece together the morning grace's final days. The ship's systems were badly damaged, the logs corrupted, but she was patient. Data always told a story if you knew how to listen. "Got something," she announced over the comm. "Partial reconstruction of the ship's logs. Sending it to your screens now?" Captain Taemin appeared in the doorway moments later, with Hanul and Kyung-Soo behind him. They gathered around Dayun's main display as she pulled up the recovered files. "The logs are fragmented, but I can give you the basic timeline," Dayun explained. Woo Park was a licensed cargo hauler. Small operation, just her and her ship. She'd been doing this for 11 years. Clean record, no violations. What was she carrying? Taemin asked. "The Valkyrie cubs? 6 of them. Being transported legally from a conservation world called Haven's Rest to a sanctuary on Valkar Prime. The paperwork is all here. All legitimate. She was supposed to arrive 3 weeks ago." Yoon pulled up another file. 5 days before she was supposed to arrive, she sent a distress call. "Here, listen." Goodwoo's voice crackled through the speakers. She sounded young, frightened, but trying to stay calm. "This is cargo vessel Morning Grace. Registration number HCH7743. We are under attack by unknown hostiles. They're demanding I surrender my cargo. I'm refusing. I repeat, I'm refusing. These cubs are under Galactic Protection Act, Section 4. I will not surrender them." Weapons fire crackled in the background. the sound of explosions. Then the recording cut out. The room was silent. Hanul's hands were clenched into fists. She fought them, Hanul whispered. She could have just given them up. There's more, Yoon said quietly. She pulled up navigation data. After the attack, the Morning Grace jumped to hyperspace. But the reactor was damaged. She made it to the void margin before it failed completely. I think she was trying to hide. Kyung-soo leaned forward, studying the technical readouts. Show me the reactor damage pattern. Dae-yoon displayed it. Kyung-soo's expression darkened. This wasn't random weapons fire, he said. Look at the angle. Look at the precision. She did this to herself. What? Taemin's voice was sharp. She deliberately damaged her own reactor to create a radiation pulse. It would have disabled the pirates' targeting systems temporarily, long enough for her to escape. Kyung-soo shook his head in amazement, but it also meant her reactor was dying. She sacrificed her ship to save the cubs. Dae-yoon pulled up more logs. After she reached the void margin, she sent another message. But this one wasn't a distress call. It was to the sanctuary on Velkar Prime. The voice that came through this time was different. Still Ji-woo, but tired, resigned. This is Ji-woo Park of the Morning Grace. I'm sending this to Velkar Prime Sanctuary. My reactor is failing. I'm in the void margin. I don't think anyone will find me in time. A long pause. The cubs are okay. I'm going to make sure they stay okay. If anyone finds this ship, please make sure they get home. They're the last breeding group. They're important. They matter. Another pause, longer this time. When Ji-woo spoke again, her voice was softer. Tell their people I'm sorry I couldn't get them there safely. But I promise I won't let them die out here. I promise? The recording ended. Hanul wiped her eyes roughly. Taemin's expression was unreadable. His alien features difficult for humans to interpret, but his voice was gentle when he spoke. Show me the rest. Everything she did after that. Dae-yoon pulled up system logs, power readings, temperature data. The story they told was heartbreaking. She had 3 days before the reactor died completely, Dae-yoon explained. Day 1, she tried everything to get the reactor stable. Nothing worked. Day 2, she stopped trying to save the reactor and started modifying the cargo hold. The displays showed power rerouting, system modifications, desperate engineering. Ji-woo had torn apart her own ship to save the cubs. She pulled power from life support, from the bridge, from her own living quarters. She connected the escape pod's batteries to the heating coils in the cargo hold. She even rigged the emergency beacon to run on a separate system so it would keep calling for help after everything else died. Kyung-soo pulled up medical data he'd compiled. I found her personal supplies in the living quarters. She had food for 2 weeks, water for longer. She didn't eat any of it. She gave all of it to the cubs. The cubs are carnivores, Taemin said. Yes, but young Valkyrie can digest certain vegetables and grains when necessary. She researched it. Made a paste they could eat. Kyung-soo's voice was thick. She was starving herself to feed them. Dae-yoon displayed the final logs. Day 3 she recorded this. Ji-woo's voice was weaker now, hoarse. Reactor will die tonight. I've done everything I can. The heating coils will run for maybe 2 more days on the backup batteries. It's not enough. It's not nearly enough. A sound like crying, quickly suppressed. I checked the star charts. No one patrols the void margin. No one's going to find us in 2 days. I know that now. Silence on the recording. Then, but I can't stop trying. They're depending on me. They're just babies. They don't understand what's happening. They trust me. More silence. Then, so quietly, I wish I could do more, the recording ended. There are no more logs after that, Dae-yoon said softly. But the system data tells the rest. She stayed in the cargo hold with the cubs. When the heating coils started to fail, she wrapped them in every thermal blanket on the ship. When those weren't enough, she gave them her coat. The coat was designed for extreme cold. It had its own heating elements. And she stayed with them, Hanul said. in the freezing cold, without a coat. She kept the power running as long as possible, Kyung-soo added. My examination shows she was working manually, replacing burnt circuits, repairing connections with her bare hands. The cold would have been agonizing. But she kept working. Taemin looked at the data, at the timeline, at the impossible dedication of one small human facing certain death. How long did she survive after the reactor died? Kyung-soo hesitated. Based on body temperature and ice crystal formation, approximately 18 hours. She kept those cubs warm for 18 hours with nothing but her body heat and sheer determination. And it worked, Daeun said, wonder in her voice. Somehow, impossibly, it worked. By the time we found them, the cubs had been without any heat source for almost 2 days. But they were huddled so close together, wrapped so carefully in that coat that they survived. They were minutes from death, but they survived. Taemin stood, his full height impressive even among aliens. Find out who attacked her. I want names. I want locations. And I want to know why anyone would attack illegal transport carrying protected species. Vec entered the room, having heard the last part. Captain, I'd been researching Valkyrie cubs. Do you know what they're worth on the black market? Tell me, these 6 together? Nearly 40 million credits? They're the last breeding group from Haven's Rest? Collectors would pay anything for them. The room went cold with understanding. Pirates, Hanul said, her voice hard. They tried to steal the cubs. When she wouldn't give them up, they tried to kill her and take them anyway. She chose to die rather than let that happen, Kyung-soo added. Tae-min looked at Guwoo's body. Still resting in the medical bay? This ordinary cargo hauler. This small human who had faced down pirates and death itself for 6 animals she barely knew. Find the pirates, he said quietly. This doesn't end here. They found her ship burned to ash, but inside, the cubs slept warm beneath her folded kotanji worked carefully, her hands gentle as she examined the smallest cub. The veterinary specialist had treated hundreds of species across the galaxy, but these 6 cubs held her heart in a way nothing else ever had. They were so small, so fragile, so impossibly alive. How are they? Hanul asked from the doorway. The engineer had visited the medical bay every day since the rescue, malnourished. Dehydrated, traumatized. Eunji stroked the cub's soft fur. But they'll survive. Thanks to her, they'll survive. The cubs were beginning to trust the crew. They ate the food Yoonji prepared, slept in warm beds, and played with toys made from spare parts. But sometimes in the quiet moments they would huddle together exactly the way they'd been found, seeking the warmth of a coat that was no longer there. Have you named them? Hanul asked. Not yet. That should be done by the Valkyrie when we deliver them. Eunji paused. But I call this little one Hope because that's what Ji-woo gave them. The news of the rescue spread across the galaxy faster than light speed. Within days, every news service was broadcasting the story. Captain Taemin found himself flooded with messages. The first came from the Valkyrie Assembly, the governing body of the Valkyrie species. The message was formal, written in the ancient style of their people. To the crew of the Eternal Tide and to the spirit of Ji-woo Park, the Valkyrie people have lost much in the wars and plagues that reduced our numbers. These 6 cubs represent our future, our hope, our very survival. We declare Ji-woo Park a keeper of the pride, the highest honor we can bestow on one not born of our blood. Her name will be sung in our halls forever. More messages followed. Dozens of species, hundreds of organizations, all expressing gratitude, wonder, and disbelief. But there were also demands. Find the pirates who did this. Bring them to justice. Make them answer for trying to destroy such precious life. In human colonies, the reaction was different, quieter, more personal. Hyjin, the human ambassador to the Galactic Council, sat in her office reading the reports. She had known Ji-woo Park once, briefly, at a cargo haulers meeting. A quiet woman, polite, unremarkable in every way, except for her kindness to animals. And now she was dead. Dead for 6 cubs she could have sold or abandoned. Dead for a choice that made no logical sense. The council wanted answers. They wanted to understand. and Hyjin had been summoned to explain humanity to them once again. The council chamber was vast, filled with representatives from hundreds of worlds. Hyjin stood at the center, small and human among giants and ancients. "Ambassador Hyjin," the council speaker began. Their voice echoed through translation devices in 1,000 languages. "We have reviewed the case of Jiwoo Park. We wish to understand. Why did she not save herself?" Hyjin took a breath. "Because she couldn't explain. The escape pod was functional. She had supplies? She had time? She couldn't leave them to die, not the cubs, not babies, but they were not her offspring. They were not her species. She had no biological imperative to protect them." "No," Hyjin agreed. "She didn't need a biological imperative. She had something else." "What?" "Compassion, empathy, the ability to see suffering and choose to end it, even at cost to herself," the council murmured among themselves. "Some species understood this. Many didn't. Is this common among humans?" another representative asked. Hyjin considered. Yes and no. Most humans wouldn't go as far as Jiwoo did, but most humans would understand why she did it. We're taught from childhood to protect those who can't protect themselves, to be kind, to care, even when it's illogical. Especially when it's illogical. Hyjin smiled sadly. Logic would have said save yourself. But Jiwoo wasn't thinking logically. She was thinking about 6 scared cubs in the dark. She was thinking that if she didn't help them, no one would. And she couldn't live with that. So she chose to die instead. She chose for them to live. The distinction seemed lost on some of the council, but others nodded slowly, understanding dawning. Aboard the Eternal Tide, Donghaen was working on a different problem. The security chief had been tracing the pirates who attacked Jiwoo. It wasn't easy. The void margin was lawless space, and pirates knew how to hide, but he was patient and angry, and very, very good at his job. "Got them," he announced, bursting into Taemin's ready room. "Krishna Syndicate. They're one of the biggest animal trafficking operations in this sector. I found the ship that attacked the Morning Grace. They're called the Bloodwind." Taemin looked up sharply. "Evidence? Weapons signature matches. And I found chatter on the criminal networks. They were bragging about the Valkyrie cubs they almost got. 40 million credits, they kept saying. Until some crazy human blew her own reactor and escaped. Where are they now?" "I don't know yet, but I'm working on it." Donghaen's expression was grim. "Captain, request permission to pursue when we find them." "I'll need council authorization, then get it. That woman died protecting those cubs. The least we can do is make sure the ones who killed her face justice." Taemin was silent for a moment, then he nodded. "I'll make the request." "But Donghaen, this is dangerous. The Krishna Syndicate is powerful. They have resources, weapons, connections. I don't care." Donghaen's voice was flat. "Jiwoo Park fought them alone with nothing but a cargo hauler and courage. We can do the same with a warship and a crew." The request was sent to the council, and to Taemin's surprise, it was approved within hours, more than approved. They were given full authority to pursue, capture, and deliver the pirates to galactic justice. "The council wants to make an example of them," Vec explained, reading the authorization. "Half the galaxy is watching this story. If the council doesn't act, they look weak," but Taemin knew it was more than that. Jiwoo's sacrifice had touched something in the council. A reminder that some things mattered more than politics or profit. That life, even small life, even animal life, had value. In the medical bay, the cubs were growing stronger. Eunji watched them play, wrestling with each other, their young voices making sounds like laughter. They would never remember Gu. Never know the woman who died for them, but the galaxy would remember. Hanuel entered, carrying a small bundle. "I found this in her quarters, her personal files. What's in them?" "Pictures mostly, her family, her ship, places she'd been." Hanuel pulled up an image. A woman with a bright smile, standing in front of the Morning Grace. She looked happy. "She was doing what she loved," Yunji said softly. "Traveling, carrying cargo, seeing the galaxy." "She had a brother," Hanuel continued, scrolling through files. "Messages to him, she told him about every job, every planet. She was supposed to visit him after this run. The words hung in the air. Supposed to. Would never. What do we tell him? Uji asked the truth, Hanul said firmly. That his sister was brave. That she saved 6 lives, that she mattered. Across the galaxy, in a small apartment on Earth, a man named Minho Park received a message. His sister was dead. She was a hero. She was coming home. He read it 3 times, not believing, not understanding. His sister, his ordinary, gentle, animal-loving sister. Dead in space for creatures she barely knew, and then he understood perfectly, because it was exactly what Duwu would do. They found her ship burned to ash, but inside, the cubs slept warm beneath her folded caught the eternal tide, moved through the void margin like a predator hunting. Captain Taman stood on the bridge, watching the scanner displays with sharp attention. Somewhere in this lawless dark, the Krishna Syndicate was hiding? Contact, announced Sora from the pilot station. The young pilot's hands danced across her controls. Small vessel, trying to stay hidden in the asteroid field ahead. Signature matches known Syndicate scout ships. Can they see us? Taemin asked. Not yet. We're running dark, passive sensors only. Follow them. Stay hidden. They'll lead us to their base. For 3 hours, the eternal tide shadowed the scout ship through twisting asteroid paths. The crew was silent, focused, every person knowing what they were hunting for. Finally, the scout ship approached a large asteroid. One that looked no different from 1,000 others, except this one had weapons, and docking ports, and ships hidden in carved bays. There, Donghayan said with satisfaction. That's their base. The security chief had assembled a strike team over the past week. Hanu for technical support and hacking. Sora for piloting. Yunji for identifying rescued animals. Vec and a dozen trained fighters for combat. And himself leading them all. How many ships at the base? Taemin asked. 15 visible. Maybe more inside. You studied the scans. Captain, this is bigger than we thought. This isn't just a pirate base. This is a major trafficking hub. Taemin felt cold anger settle in his chest. How many prisoners? Unknown. But I'm detecting life signs. Lots of them. Different species? All caged. Then we're going in. Prepare assault pods. Taemin turned to his crew. Our mission is to capture the pirates and free any prisoners. We have authorization from the Galactic Council. This is legal, but it's also dangerous. Anyone who wants to stay behind, I understand. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. They were all staying, the assault pods launched silently, magnetic clamps pulling them toward the asteroid. The base's sensors didn't detect them until it was too late. By the time alarms began screaming, Hanul had already hacked into their systems. I'm in their network, she reported calmly, fingers flying across her portable terminal. Opening the prisoner bay doors now, and disabling their defensive weapons. Good work, Donghayan said. Strike team, move in. They entered through the prisoner bay, a massive chamber filled with cages. The sight made Yunji gasp. Hundreds of animals, rare species from across the galaxy, crammed into tiny spaces. The air stank of fear and suffering. By the stars, Vec muttered. This is worse than we thought. Free them, Donghayan ordered. Hanul, can you open all the cages at once? On it. The cages opened simultaneously. Confused, frightened animals began to emerge. Some ran immediately. Others cowered, not believing freedom was real. Nji moved among them, speaking softly, using every language and gesture she knew to calm them. Easy, she murmured to a pair of terrified creatures that looked like birds made of crystal. You're safe now. We're here to help. The pirates reacted quickly. Armed guards rushed toward the prisoner bay, weapons ready. But Vec and his fighters were waiting. The battle was brief and brutal. Most pirates dropped their weapons when faced with trained Galactic Federation forces. A few fought. Nunwan, secure the prisoners, Donghayan commanded. We're going for the command center. They fought through corridors, past storage bays filled with stolen goods and illegal cargo. The base was a maze, but Hanul had the maps now, stolen from their own systems. She guided them through the fastest routes. "Command center ahead," she warned. "Heavy defenses. And the boss is there. Someone named Vekros." "Stack up," Dong Hyan ordered. Breaching in 3, 2, 1. The door exploded inward. The command center was chaos. Pirates scrambling for weapons, consoles sparking, and in the center, a massive Kreshna warrior. Vekros was nearly 3 meters tall, covered in armor plating, holding weapons in 4 arms. "You dare attack my base?" Vekros roared. "You dare interfere with my business?" "This isn't business," Dong Hyan said coldly. "This is justice." Vekros laughed, a sound like rocks grinding. "Justice? For what? For taking animals that no one owns? For claiming profit from stupid creatures? For murder." Dong Hyan's voice cut through the room like a blade. 5 days ago, you attacked a cargo hauler called the Morning Grace. You tried to steal her cargo. You damaged her ship. You killed her. I kill many ships. Why should I care about one more? Because she was protecting 6 Valkyrie cubs? Because she refused to let you take them? Because she died making sure they survived? Vekros's expression changed, memory flickering. The human woman. The one who destroyed her own reactor. Yes, I remember. He laughed again. She was a fool. All she had to do was give me the cubs. But no, humans are always so dramatic. Dong Hyan felt rage rise in him, hot and fierce. But Hanuel stepped forward, her small human frame dwarfed by the massive pirate. She held up a small device. "Before we take you," she said quietly, "I want you to hear something." She pressed play. Giwu's voice filled the command center. Her final log, the one recorded in the dying ship, surrounded by freezing darkness and 6 scared cubs. "They're just babies. Someone has to protect them." The words echoed in the sudden silence. Hanu broadcasted across all frequencies, to every pirate ship in the system, to every communicator in the base. "They're just babies. Someone has to protect them." Some of the pirates, the ones from species with honor codes, with concepts of protecting the young, began to lower their weapons, slowly, reluctantly, but they lowered them. "She gave her life for animals that weren't even her species," Hanu continued. "She froze to death keeping them warm. She starved herself to feed them. She did everything she could, knowing she was going to die, just to give them a chance to live. And you would have taken them, sold them, destroyed the last hope of an entire species. For money." Vekros snarled. "Sentiment is weakness." "No," Vek said, stepping forward. Even he, a warrior who'd killed in battle, looked disgusted. "Preying on the helpless is weakness. She was stronger than you'll ever be." Vekros tried to fight. He raised his weapons, bellowing rage. But he was alone. His own crew had turned away from him, unwilling to fight for someone who had no honor. Dong Hyan's team subdued him quickly. The cleanup took hours. Pirates were secured and transported to holding cells on the Eternal Tide. Animals were freed, cataloged, and prepared for return to their worlds. Hanu worked with the base's computers, copying every file, every record, every piece of evidence. "Captain," she reported to Taemin, "I found the Bloodwind's logs. The ship that attacked Jiwoo." The captain kept detailed records. "And?" "He wrote that the human woman fought better than most military pilots. That she was clever, resourceful, and brave. He wrote that he respected her." Hanu's voice hardened. "Then he wrote that respect doesn't pay bills, and he was glad when her ship jumped away damaged. He thought she'd die somewhere quiet and save him the trouble." Taemin closed his eyes briefly. "Send all of it to the council. They'll need it for the trial." The base was empty now, all prisoners freed, all pirates captured. Sora piloted the Eternal Tide away from the asteroid, back toward civilized space. In the cargo hold, hundreds of rescued animals rested. Safe at last. In the medical bay, the 6 Valkyrie cubs slept, unaware of the battle fought in their name. Yunji sat beside them, watching them breathe, watching them dream. "We got them," she whispered to the memory of Jiwoo Park. "We got the ones who hurt you. They'll pay for what they did." The cubs stirred, making soft sounds. In their sleep, they huddled together, still seeking warmth, still remembering somehow the coat that saved them. "Rest," Yunji said softly. "You're going home." They found her ship burned to ash, but inside, the cubs slept warm beneath her folded coat. The Galactic Court was the largest building on Unity Station, built to hold representatives from every known species. Today, it was filled beyond capacity. Beings from 1,000 worlds had come to witness the trial of Vekros, and the Krishna Syndicate. Captain Taman sat in the witness section, watching as the pirates were led in chains before the judges. Vekros stood tall even in defeat, his 4 eyes scanning the crowd with contempt. The head judge, an ancient being whose species had created the first galactic laws, spoke with a voice that resonated through translation devices. "Vekros of the Krishna Syndicate, you are charged with murder, attempted theft of protected species, illegal trafficking of endangered animals, and crimes against galactic peace. How do you plead?" "I did what I had to do to survive," Vekros said without remorse. "The galaxy is not kind to the weak." "Yet you preyed on the weak," the judge replied. "On animals that could not defend themselves. On a single woman protecting her cargo. She should have surrendered." The judge was silent for a moment. "Then show the evidence." The courtroom displays lit up with data. The attack on the Morning Grace, the damage to the reactor, Gyu's final logs. The discovery of the cubs, the pirate base with its hundreds of victims. Everything was laid bare for the galaxy to see when Gyu's voice played through the court, saying softly, "They're just babies. Someone has to protect them." There was not a sound in the massive chamber. "The court finds you guilty on all charges," the judge said. "You will be sentenced to maximum detention on a prison world. Your organization will be dismantled. Your assets will be used to fund conservation efforts across the galaxy. You will never harm another living being again." Vekros snarled, but guards led him away. The trial was over. Justice, at least in its legal form, was done. But the real story was just beginning. The Eternal Tide approached Velkar Prime 3 days later. The planet was beautiful, covered in forests and grasslands, the perfect home for the Velkari people. As the ship entered orbit, a dozen escort vessels rose to meet them, an honor guard for the precious cargo they carried. "Velkar Prime Control, this is the Eternal Tide," Taman broadcast. "We're bringing your children home." The response was immediate. "Welcome, Eternal Tide. Welcome, Cubs. Welcome and thank you." The landing ceremony was enormous. Thousands of Velkari gathered at the spaceport, along with representatives from dozens of species who considered the Velkari sacred. When Yunji carried the first cub down the ramp, the crowd erupted in celebration. The cubs, now healthy and strong, looked around with wide eyes. They were home. They didn't know it yet, but they were home. An elderly Velkari approached, tears in his large eyes. He was the keeper of the pride, the leader of his people. He bowed deeply to Yunji. "Thank you for bringing them back to us. Thank you for caring for them. But most of all, thank you for honoring the one who saved them." He gestured to a space near the spaceport entrance. There, being unveiled at that very moment, was a statue. It showed a human woman kneeling, her coat wrapped around 6 cubs, her face peaceful and determined. The detail was perfect. Jiwoo Park, carved in white stone that seemed to glow in the sunlight. The inscription beneath was written in every language of the galaxy. She gave warmth when the stars turned cold. Yunji felt tears streaming down her face. Hanul, standing beside her, was openly crying. Even Vek, the hardened warrior, looked away to compose himself. "We will never forget her," the keeper said. "Every Velkari cub born from this day forward will learn her name. Jiwoo Park, the human who chose sacrifice over safety. The woman who proved that compassion crosses all boundaries of species and space." The ceremony continued for hours. The cubs were blessed, celebrated, and welcomed by their people. They would grow up knowing they were special, that they represented hope for their entire species, but they would also grow up knowing about Jiwoo, the woman who died so they could live, aboard the Eternal Tide. Now, preparing to depart, the crew gathered in the observation deck. Taemin stood before them, looking at each face. What we witnessed, he said quietly, what Ju Woo Park did will change how species view humanity. Not as warriors, not as merchants, but as beings capable of impossible compassion. She was just one woman, Hanul said. She didn't represent all of humanity, didn't she? Taemin asked. I've been researching human history since we found her. Do you know how many humans have done similar things? How many have sacrificed themselves for others, even strangers, even animals? It's not unique. It's not rare. It's what you do. It's what we should all do, Vex said gruffly. Protect those who can't protect themselves. I've fought in wars. I've killed enemies. But I never understood true strength until I saw what that woman did with nothing but determination and love. Kyung-soo pulled up a display. I've been getting messages from across the galaxy. Medical facilities, rescue organizations, conservation groups. They're all asking about human compassion. They want to understand it, study it. Some even want to teach it to their own people. Can you teach compassion? Dae-yoon wondered. I don't know, Kyung-soo admitted. But people are trying. Because of her? On Earth, in a small apartment, Min-ho Park stood at his window looking at the stars. His sister's body had been returned home with full honors. The funeral had been attended by representatives from species he'd never heard of, bringing gifts and condolences in languages he couldn't understand, but he understood their grief, their respect, their awe. His sister, who'd barely finished school, who'd struggled to make her business profitable, who'd loved animals more than money. His ordinary, gentle sister had become a hero to a galaxy. He held a letter in his hands. It was from the Valkyrie Keeper, written in careful Korean. Your sister saved our species. But more than that, she reminded us what it means to care. We have named the cubs in her honor, using human names. They will carry pieces of her spirit forward into the future. Thank you for sharing her with us. We are sorry we cannot return her to you as she was. But know that she lives on in 6 young lives and in the hearts of billions across the stars. Min-ho wiped his eyes. He could hear his sister's voice in his memory from when they were children. If something's scared and alone, you have to help it. That's what good people do. She'd lived by that. She died by that. And now the galaxy was learning from that. Months passed. The story of Jiwoo Park and the Valkyrie cubs spread across every world. It became more than news. It became legend. Parents told it to their children. Teachers used it in lessons about ethics and sacrifice. The phrase human compassion entered galactic vocabulary. Shorthand for the willingness to help others at cost to oneself. Conservation efforts received unprecedented funding, inspired by one woman's sacrifice. Trafficking organizations found themselves targeted by new laws and increased enforcement. The Krishna Syndicate was completely destroyed. Its members scattered or imprisoned and in sanctuaries across the galaxy. The rescued animals from the pirate base lived in safety, cared for by people who'd been moved by Jiwoo's example. The 6 Valkyrie cubs grew into adults. They were named Ji, Woo, Min, Ho-ha, and Newell, honoring the humans who'd saved them and told their story. They had cubs of their own. And those cubs had cubs, and slowly, carefully, the Valkyrie population began to recover. Years later, a young Valkyrie named Ji, named after the woman who saved her grandmother, stood before the statue on Velkar Prime. She was a teacher now, about to give a lesson to a group of young cubs. This is Jiwoo Park, she told them, pointing to the statue. She was human. She was ordinary. She had no special powers, no great strength, no magic. She was just a person doing a job. The cubs listened, their large eyes fixed on the white stone figure. But when she was tested, when she had to choose between her life and the lives of others, she chose others. She chose sacrifice. She chose love. And because of that choice, we're all here today. Did she know she would be famous? One cub asked. No, she thought she would die alone and forgotten. She did it anyway. That's what makes it special. Was she scared? Probably. But she did it anyway. Why? She smiled. because someone had to protect them, because they were just babies, because it was the right thing to do, even when it was the hard thing. The cubs looked at the statue with new understanding. One of them reached out a small paw, touching the carved coat that had saved their ancestors. "We should all be like her," the cub said softly. "Yes," G agreed. "We should." Across the galaxy, on 1,000 worlds, in 1,000,000 classrooms and homes and quiet conversations, people said the same thing. About a woman who chose warmth over safety. About a human who proved that one ordinary life, lived with extraordinary compassion, could change everything. The stars turned cold and distant as they always did. But somewhere in the dark, in the place where the morning grace once drifted, there was warmth. The warmth of memory. The warmth of sacrifice. The warmth of love that crossed species and space and death itself. And in that warmth, 6 cubs had survived. And in surviving, had given hope to a galaxy that sometimes forgot what hope looked like. Her name was Wu Park. She was a cargo hauler. She was ordinary in every way except one. When it mattered most, she chose to be a hero, and the galaxy would never forget.